Hey nerds. I'm going to talk about season 3, episode 2 of The Flash. It's called Paradox. I'm going to start with some key points first. First, I love the Felicity cameo and her helping Barry out with figuring out some of the things that have been changed and just being a sounding board for the fact that he did all this to his friends' lives. And he didn't really want to tell the main cast of The Flash yet. So I think it was a cool thing, and it's nice to see that there are some changes that have happened to the Arrow universe specifically as well. Baby Sarah not existing sucks, but now we have Diggle Jr., who's a small child now, who I'm just kind of like, oh snap. Now it makes sense with the whole Legends of Tomorrow timeline. When they go in the future and there's a Diggle Jr. and he's such and such old, and it's just like, wait, okay. Yeah, so it was like, he hadn't been born yet. I was wondering, I was like, man, he needs to be born soon. So they retroactively made him exist, which is cool. I wonder if Sarah's still dead. Probably still is. I mean, considering if things are canonly back and forth, like episode 1, episode 2, episode 2, then by the time this changes and Flash goes over to tell Felicity these things, I'm thinking most of the stuff has already happened. However, I don't think they're gonna change what happened in episode 1 of Arrow. It wouldn't make sense. I mean, they have a memorial statue for Sarah. So I'm just gonna say that, yeah, other than Diggle having a son, I'm pretty sure there's no other changes. Other than minor changes of characters that we haven't even, really seen, unless there was something in a flashback or something. Even that's a stretch. But it's nice to see that they're trying to show that this time travel stuff is very far-reaching. It didn't just affect people directly in Flash's life, but also people kind of in Flash's life. Net's point, the whole relationship changes thing, I think challenges the actors a lot, and they've been really challenged between the time travel that's happened and the little time travel that happened in season 1, and then the huge thing where they go to different worlds and people were completely different in season 2, and now in season 3 we have 2 different timelines, one which is apparently our permanent timeline now that is different than basically the reality we've been in for the last 2 seasons. So certain characters are dead, certain characters don't exist, I guess, maybe, and there are people who didn't have powers in the original season timeline, and now they do, which is really cool. So, I mean, it's great that Caitlin Snow has powers. It's great that Cisco is going to get a darker kind of story arc now because he's handling the grief of his brother. I think the drama of Barry's surrogate family fighting, Iris and her dad, I think that drama's kind of evaporated because, they had all that happen off screen, and they just kind of took Barry at his word for being like, or not at his word, but she's very smart and made the assumptions like, yeah, we probably got along, it probably went well. And they talked about it, and they probably had the similar conversation that they had in the original season, when it happened, in season 2 when it happened, but just, she's dead now, I can't really talk to her, have that final moment with her, like she ends up having had in the other timeline. Yeah, it's getting very convoluted now, talking about The Flash. But I don't mind that. It still kept it light, even though I shouldn't say it kept it light. I mean, they still had chances for levity in terms of the jokes, and seeing Barry stutter and just be totally awkward about trying to get all his friends to cooperate with what he wanted, even though he wasn't telling them, was really funny. Although I will admit that it was kind of Harrison Wells of him to, keep so many secrets and just kind of try to manipulate things just because he knows the people involved. And just demanding, I shouldn't say demanding, but asking for answers to things where he knows that he's going to be stepping on toes. Although with the darker Cisco, I do hope he starts wearing t-shirts again soon, because his graphic tees are amazing and make me so very happy. I think that his more muted clothing choices kind of reflect his mind state right now, and I'm thinking that they are probably going to keep that up until, as a character, he feels more fulfilled and he completes the story arc and getting over this grief. especially in terms of trying to stay friends with Barry and and trying not to blame him for not going back in time. I feel like the Flash is gonna have to go and back in time again, because the time of his mother's death is so important to this show that he's probably gonna go back there again before the end of the series. Because I think he's gonna wag his finger and tell himself not to go back again, or he might have already done that. It's really convoluted now because there's so many flashes in there, but the whole fight where he stops him has kind of been erased. So, yeah. Reverse Flash is still running around, so we got that to look forward to. And I'm glad the Reverse Flash is now being like his rival villain without being the main villain of the season. However, Dr. Alchemy, being the main villain of the season is a nice change of pace, as to not have a speedster be the main villain. I hope it doesn't turn out to be, oh wait, no, there's a speedster involved too. It'd be nice to not have that in that epic race thing done again, especially since the season premiere and this episode kind of used a lot of that same style of fighting that we've grown used to in the season premieres, finales, and mid-season finales because of all the speedsters we've been showing and fighting. Although I am hoping to see more good speedsters soon. Wink, wink, hint, hint. Kid Flash, especially because Dr. Alchemy, according to Barry, is probably going to give everyone back their powers that they had in Flashpoint, and make them realize what the differences in their lives were. I don't know the background of Dr. Alchemy. I will look it up. But as of right now, he's completely new to me. I don't know if he's a Flash only villain, but I mean, if they're kind of incorporating him into this changed timeline Flashpoint kind of story, then I imagine that if he didn't show up in some way in the Flashpoint comics, that he probably has to do with universe and time altering storylines in the comics. It was pretty ruthless of him killing the rival in prison, even though the rival was totally up to try again, like super jonesing for it. But I am kind of glad they got rid of him, because it was kind of like, hey, look, a speedster. We're going to do some speedster battles. Okay, speedster battle's done. Let's kill him. Especially because as a character, he was kind of just an example of what Dr. Alchemy was offering to the people whose lives he's changing. But other than that, he didn't seem too great. I don't know if he's from the comics or not, but even though the actor who played him did really well, especially in his villain form, I think that in his civilian form especially, at the end of the last episode, it was great to see the teaser and this character is still around and something's going to happen with him still. And then for this episode, for him to be basically just trying to get revenge on the Flash, and not have any real backstory other than you changed time and I wanted my life back. I mean, that was cool, but it didn't show any different relationships or it affecting his relationships. I think it would have been interesting if they could have fit in a subplot of, that like kind of ruining his life, kind of like always not being there, always daydreaming about a different life. And, parents, girlfriends, everything just like falling apart for him. But, he was kind of a one note, unfortunately. And that's okay, because I'm sure that considering the internal strife we've gotten, this season's going to be ripe with internal agony just as much as it's going to be ripe with new villains. Speaking of that, I hope Caitlin doesn't become a bad guy and go crazy as Killer Frost. That'd suck. And we've already seen an evil Killer Frost because of Earth 2, so we don't really need evil Caitlin, right? I like the fact that Cisco is on his way to becoming Vibe, and he's used his gloves, and it was kind of cool. He was just in his regular clothes, though. Almost looked like he wasn't. For a second, I thought he wasn't. It reminded me of the Earth 2, and it was like, Reverb. And when he's like, being all looking at the gloves and telling Barry that he doesn't probably know what he's talking about, that he was working on these gloves now, that he might go, what was it, Cloud City Vader on him eventually, like he might become a bad guy at first and be mad at the Flash, but given that he helped the Flash in this episode, there's no way that's happening. And I'm glad, because I want Cisco to remain a good guy. Talked a lot. Is there anything I'm missing? Can't wait to see if they put Kid Flash off the show to pursue other ventures and other CW shows. That'd be cool, because I heard the creators don't want to cloud up the show The Flash with more than one Flash. So they probably wouldn't go the sidekick route. Similar to how when in Arrow they did put Roy Harper in it, they didn't call him Speedy. They saved that for Thea, but made him Red Arrow, the fully fledged not really sidekick version of Green Arrow's sidekick, and then took him off the show eventually. It was really interesting, the changes to the timeline that affected Arrow. It was really interesting to see that they basically evaporated the plot with Iris and her dad fighting by having them make up off screen. But we didn't want to really rehash some of these moments, and I think it did play really fast and loose as an episode, while still trying to have these really poignant emotional moments. And I think that, no pun intended, or I guess all the puns intended, the season's only going to pick up steam. Keep watching The Flash, nerds, and I hope you enjoyed it.